Since President Donald Trump took office, many in the West have been worried that what he stood for on the campaign trail may accelerate the trend towards deglobalization. Meanwhile, President Xi Jinping said in his policy speech in Davos that China stands ready to safeguard the principles of globalization and free trade. Does it mean that China will replace the U.S. leadership? Is the Belt and Road Initiative intended to be inclusive in pursuing co-prosperity? To answer these and other questions, I'm very happy to be joined here by Ambassador Zhou Wenzhong, Secretary General of the Boao Forum of Asia. That's a topic. This is a dialogue. I'm Yang Rui.
Born in 1945, Zhou Wenzhong graduated from the University of International Business and Economics and attended the University of Bath and the London School of Economics in the UK. He was ambassador to Barbados and to Antigua and Barbuda from 1990 to 1993. From 1998 to 2001, Zhou served as ambassador to the Commonwealth of Australia. He held leading posts at the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, where he served as Deputy Director of the American Affairs Department until 1994. In 2001, he was promoted to Assistant Minister, and in 2003 he became Vice Minister of the Ministry of Foreign Affairs. In 2005, Zhou Wenzhong became Ambassador Extraordinary and Plenipotentiary of the People's Republic of China to the United States. And in 2010, he was appointed as the Secretary General of the Boao Forum for Asia, where he currently serves.
Welcome to Dialogue, Ambassador Zhou. Thank you. Why did the Boao Forum for Asia decide to use the theme of globalization and freed, emphasizing the Asian perspective this time around?
This is actually a decision taken by the board of directors. And I think they all feel that globalization has come to a very important juncture. That is because there are people now who openly speak against globalization. And and of course, we all know what happened in the States, we all know what happened in the UK and so forth. And so which way the globalization will be going in. So I think that's a concern in the mind of many people.
Here in Asia, that's why you're talking about the Asian perspectives.
Yes, and so I think many members because the Secretariat has asked them about the topic, their preference for the topic. And I think this is a consensus. That is, it's time for Boao Forum to try to speak about globalization, try to find out how Asian countries and the people in the region conceive sort of the globalization. What's their perception? What is their future of globalization?
In an age of protectionism and when multinationals are in their retreat, so is globalization. Do you think China is ready to assume the leadership as what President Xi Jinping said in Davos?
Globalization, I think, is inevitable. It is required by the development of the productive forces, and is subjective of anyone's preference. Whether you like it or not, it will keep developing.
You mean it's irreversible?
It's irreversible, and that if you go with it, then of course you will benefit from it. If you try to sort of go against it, then I think you will eventually you will lose what you hope to get.
Look, Ambassador Zhou, perhaps we have misunderstood what President Donald Trump stood for on the campaign trail. He said in a recent interview that he's not a fan of protectionism. Actually, he wants to take a second look at what can be achieved through the process of globalization. That means somehow a process of re-globalization instead of deglobalization is well underway from his perspective. Do you think what he says carries some ring of truth?
We all know what he said during the campaign. And of course, that's what he needs to do during the campaign for the votes he needs in the end to get elected. But he did not do what he said he would do after he got elected. So far, he did not impose some 40% punitive tariff against Chinese exports. He did take measure against one sort of washing machine, export of washing machine to the United States. But that's all. That's all what he did. So he's done so far. So we'll see. And whether it's an entire campaign rhetorics or it is expression of he plans to do. So I think we need to wait and see.
Yes, we need to figure out what he really delivers. But he has rejected TPP. And one of the executive orders he signed in the Oval Office after taking office is, of course, beating retreat from the TPP. And then that did worry Prime Minister Shinzo Abe, who went to Washington hat in hand twice. So from your perspective, or from the Asian perspective, do you think China is ready to join the TPP to answer the call of some of the members of the TPP who were actually those who first put forward the initiative?
From our point of view, I think there are parallel. It is parallel to RCEP, FTAP. So it's on the part of different countries in the region.
Are you suggesting that Chinese voices are actually divided across the broad spectrum as to whether should accept the invitation and join the TPP without the United States?
I think TPP and RCEP are not competitive against one another. And so, from our point of view, they can coexist for the benefit of prosperity for the region. So what I'm trying to say is that it took a long time, 10 years, for 12 countries to agree to reach agreement with regard to TPP. And of course, Japan, they all signed it. They all signed the TPP. Japan was the first of the 12 to ratify it at this Diet. But of course, now the U.S. has decided to pull out. And so people turn their sort of attention to RCEP. It took countries, relevant countries, 5 years to come this far. And it was predicted that RCEP may come to a successful sort of end of negotiations. But somehow, maybe some more time is needed for the countries concerned to complete the negotiations in terms of the agriculture products and also in terms of investment.
There's no doubt that China has benefited enormously from the existing world economic order, including WTO, the World Bank, IMF, so on and so forth, since the end of the Second World War. However, what do you think of the alleged systematic financial risks? Since this year, we're going to commemorate the 20th anniversary of the Asian financial crisis, and this year also marks the 10th anniversary of the mortgage crisis in the United States. I believe experts, economists, policymakers in China are doing their homework as to how to avoid repeating the same stupid mistakes that had caused the financial crisis in Asia 20 years ago and in Wall Street in the year 2008. So what can be done for us to mitigate the impact of possible financial risks?
I think one lesson all countries should learn from the two crises is that what we need is a sense of community of common destiny. The reason why I say this is because the two crises took place because certain countries concerned thought about on itself. And they were trying to take the lead in the efforts for globalization. And they want to monopolize, the direction in which the globalization is going. And so I think every country, including developed and developing, they have all benefit from globalization, but maybe to varying degrees. But what's happening is in countries like United States or countries in Europe, the distribution of wealth is problematic, and too much wealth were in the hands of too few, and so the the people mistook globalization as a root cause of the problems they are confronted with. So then the politicians try to misguide people to sort of think that it is globalization that should be responsible for their problems. And I think this is very misleading and also very short-sighted.
As if I got a strong feeling that you were referring to the complaints of a sinking middle class in the olive shift society of the West, because their salaries have failed to be raised over the past decade. Particularly those losers in the Rust Belt, they turned out to be the bulk of the electorate who supported Donald Trump. Hence, we saw the rise of populism. Now, let's come back to examine what's happening on our periphery. South Korea, the deployment of THAAD has indeed caused a crisis in our bilateral relationship, and there's obviously a strong noise calling for boycott. But South Korea enjoys a large amount of free trade after signing the FTA with China. From your perspective, what can be done to seek a proper solution to the current crisis?
I think what's going on is that the United States is trying to manipulate the situation in Northeast Asia. But I think they should be careful about the balance of power in that region, because the Northeast Asia is very volatile in terms of the balance of power. And if they tip the balance, try to tip the balance in their favor, I think they should bear in mind China's core interests and also the interests of other parties in the region. And one other point I would like to make is that, the manufacturing in the United States sort of lost a very precious opportunity in the 80s of last century. And because of the speculative activities on the part of finance in the United States, so manufacturing lagged behind. And in the meantime, countries in Asia, such as China, Japan, South Korea, have developed tremendously in terms of their manufacturing. So what is happening is hollow-ized in terms of U.S. manufacturing. And the manufacturing has moved out of the United States. And so actually the finance has become too speculative, and then there comes the two crisis.
Okay, thank you so much. You are watching Dialogue with Ambassador Zhou Wenzhong, Secretary General of Boao Forum of Asia. We conducted this interview on the sidelines of the 16th Boao Forum of Asia. This is a major platform for addressing the issue of regional integration in Asia. We'll be back in a short while. Please stay with us. Welcome back, Ambassador Zhou. Let's look at the Belt and Road Initiative, because a summit meeting is soon to take place in Beijing. What will be the major issues? Since we've been discussing whether China's notion of being inclusive in pursuing co-prosperity will more sympathy and support from developed and developing nations.
I think One Belt and One Road is China's perception of globalization for all countries along the road, along the belt. Because globalization is inevitable, and it's independent of anyone's will. If you go with it, and you will benefit from it. If you try to stop it, and it will fail. And so I think the campaign rhetoric about U.S. comes first is not the right thing he should say, because what we try to advocate is common prosperity. So I hope those who are in office will think about it. It's no longer a world where one country or a few countries could monopolize what they already are in possession of and refuse to share that with others.
China was able to contribute 30% to the world economic growth for the past couple of years. But job creation remains a top concern for policymakers if we decide to register the GDP growth rate at 6.5% for the year 2017. What do you think will be the areas where jobs will be created to live up to the expectations of, say, 11 million? 11 million need to have their jobs. Last year, we were able to create also more than 10 million.
That's a very enormous challenge before China. And, but urbanization is taking place very fast in China. And every year, about 12 million people will move from countryside into cities. And right now, the rate of urbanization is some 56%. And the target set for 2020 is to increase that to 60% or more than 60%. So that is to say, every year you need to urbanize 12 million people, move them from countryside to cities. And that is actually what is happening. And so jobs, of course, as economy grows, there will be more jobs created for that 12 million people, whom will move from countryside villages into cities.
Yes, the development of the service industry as well as urbanization will come hand in hand to create enough jobs for those who are hungry for opportunities. Now, what do you think of the essence of supply-side restructuring on the agenda of Premier Li Keqiang?
Supply-side sort of economics, I think on the one hand, we still need to create demand, try to increase demand. On the other hand, the new focus will be on the supply side. In terms of reform, there is much we need to do in terms of reform. For instance, reform of the finance, reform of monetary, reform of education, reform of healthcare, and reform of urbanization sort of policy and so forth. All these reforms constitute what we need to do during the supply side sort of restructure.
Ambassador Zhou, Premier Li Keqiang is in Australia for an official visit, and the dynamics of the bilateral economic trade may have been undermined by the drop in commodity prices. That's what we call the resource curse. You were the ambassador to Australia around the time of the Sydney Olympic Games. Many years have passed. Now you are the Secretary General of Boao. To what degree do you think the current bilateral trade can be brought to a higher level?
Australia, of course, is a country which is quite far away from China, but on the other hand, it has a lot to do with our relations in this part of the world. The reason why I say this is because they sometimes are in two minds. Ideologically, maybe at the bottom of their heart, they feel they are part of the West. But in terms of their geographical location, they are part of Asia Pacific. So I hope they will think, and also they will act as a member of the Asia Pacific big family. It will not be easy because different people in Australia have different views on this question. They, ideologically speaking, or philosophically speaking, they feel they are closer to the United States. But economically speaking, they need China because trade between China and Australia is very important for them. So when I was ambassador in Australia, we started the iron ore sort of business, and China continues to import large quantities of their grain and also their iron ore. So economically speaking, China is a very important partner. So I hope they will gradually accept China as a friend in terms of pursuing the common prosperity for the Asia-Pacific region.
One of the pillars in the campaign of President Trump was the construction of infrastructure. That means billions of dollars. This time around, King Salman of Saudi Arabia came over to sign many agreements with the PRC about more investment from China, and infrastructure is no exception. There are similarities between Australia and Saudi Arabia in that both might be suffering from the resource curse. Australia economy suffers major setback during the recession and due to the decline in iron ore prices. Do you think Australia could act like Saudi Arabia, attract more of the Chinese investment in building their infrastructure? Otherwise, I cannot figure out how more of the imports can be sustained in the commodity area.
We buy other things from them too. A lot of dairy products. We buy a lot of agricultural products from Australia. So economically speaking, in terms of trade, China is very important to Australia. They also see things that way. But as I said, China's economy will continue to develop, and we will continue to import from Australia. But I also hope that they would try to come to terms on other issues, sort of come to terms with their neighbors in the region.
Mm-hmm. This year witnesses the 16th anniversary of the Boao Forum of Asia. Looking back, what has this forum done in promoting both the idea of regional integration and dynamics of individual economic growth for the member states?
We celebrated the 15th anniversary last year. So the forum has gone a long way, so to speak. The purpose of the forum is to promote regional integration. And it came into being against the backdrop of Asian financial crisis. And so one lesson countries in the region learned is that they need to stick together. They need to work for a still deeper integration. So that's what we try to do. Ours is a non-governmental platform. We try to encourage people to come and to have exchange of their views and to try to sort of have a voice have a say in the decision making, in the in the formulation of the rules and so forth. And I think in the past we have chosen the right topic. For instance, this year we will do globalization and the free trade, and last year we did Asia's new future, moving towards a community of common destiny, and so forth. So
it sounds, the idea sounds smart to have regional integration. However, in both the United States and Europe, we see the rise of populism, rejecting the idea of globalization. Now, when we come back to examine the realities of Asia, you see different levels of economic growth, to say nothing of emerging geopolitical and geoeconomic rivalries between major economies here, ranging from the divided Korean Peninsula to Diaoyu Island, Taiwan, and South China Sea. So if you put these things of adversity together into a perspective, how difficult is it for the mission of Boao to facilitate the momentum of regional integration?
Differences do exist. I mean, differences in views regarding all these issues do exist. But on the other hand, our forum has provided a platform where people from different countries in the region could have a free exchange of their views. Some of them are former government officials, some of them are still in office, and they could have a very free sort of exchange without any reservation, and that's exactly what we hope they will do. And we try to share the point of view of Asia with people in other regions of the world. So I think, I hope the forum could continue to play a very constructive role in formulating the Asia view on all these issues.
Thank you very much, Ambassador Zhou. I do appreciate it.
My pleasure.
Thanks a lot.